Sustainability is the buzzword, but let's look at the women's perspective. What's the women's role?
Well, I was really lucky to hear a presentation by Mary Robinson, who's the former President of Ireland, when I was in New York earlier in the year, and she spoke about gender equality and climate change. And we were all sort of thinking, I don't quite get the connection here. But as she explained it, it was really interesting because around the world globally, around about 80% of the world's food is produced by women.
80%?
Yes, when you take into account all the third world nations and women in rice paddies and small plots and things like that, and so it's just a really huge percentage. So when you look at it from that perspective, you see that the role of women in farming sustainably is actually incredibly important in the world, and yet the majority of those women don't have land tenure. They're not allowed to own their land, they're not allowed to manage finance, they're very uneducated. So, you know, you start to see that the issues around climate change are severely impacted by issues around women's empowerment and gender equality, which was really quite an interesting concept. And when you bring that back into the New Zealand context, you start to think, well, what's women's role around sustainability and climate change here? And we look at things like, you know, women do have land ownership issues, particularly in rural around succession planning. Mm-hmm. You know, we have still some very antiquated ideas around that. We perhaps don't have enough women in our agricultural science fields. So, you know, there's a lot of issues there that we can be doing better at.
Because there wouldn't be many farmers who don't have a partner, as in male farmers, female partner, who does the majority of the office work, the computer work, the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. That tends to be the woman's role.
The brains rather than the brawn.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I mean, this is generalisation. There are women doing other things, but we also have significant issues for women in working in the agricultural sector, particularly around mothers and looking after children. And we've got now things such as WorkSafe and the issue of children on farms. And whilst, you know, the safety of the child is absolutely paramount, it does create unintended barriers to on-farm employment for women, particularly around this time of year when you've got lambing and calf rearing and things starting to come up, which is traditionally where women on farm work. And now if you can't take the children, how does that all happen? And how do the women still get involved? So, you know, there's unintended barriers that are creeping in. And one of the really interesting statistics that have come out recently is that in the rankings of countries around where it's a good place to be a mum, New Zealand has slipped from 4th to 17th. Now that's a huge drop, and we have to think, well, is it because we're starting to do things, we're reversing, or is it because our rate of progress has slowed to the point that we're now being overtaken by countries with more progressive agendas? And that's probably the case. And it's issues around paid parental leave, good access to childcare, and even just the sharing of the child raising responsibility, you know, who's looking after the children, who's working, all those things. And the OECD tell us that if you have more women involved in the economic and policy and decision making, you actually have better economic growth. So now we start to look about women on boards and women in roles of leadership, and how that all then interrelates with sustainability for the future.
Because I thought we were doing pretty well. I mean, we've had women prime ministers and women head of justice and women who've been governor general. And
well, we are doing really well, but it's like any report card, you can do better. And with women in leadership and women on board and things, it's not enough just to have numbers. You know, it's more than just a bums on seats situation. You actually need to have policies that support women's involvement, and that's around, you know, family-friendly workplaces and financial policies and employment policies and things that actually make it easier for women to be involved. So if you're talking about sustainability, you actually need to be at the table, and that's a really key phrase Sheryl Sandberg, who's CEO of Facebook, talks about. She talks about it's not enough just to have the numbers. You actually need to be at the table where the discussions are being held, where the policies are being made and the decisions taken, and you need to have women involved in that whole process right from the grassroots up if you're going to have good outcomes throughout. So it's really about getting that gender equality throughout the whole spectrum, not just in terms of numbers, but actually involvement in the consultation rounds as well. and that's an area where Rural Women do a lot of work in terms of ensuring that women's voice is coming through, and that we're supporting women through business with our Enterprising Rural Women Award and leadership training and promoting the empowerment of women.
To me, you've got an ideal opportunity here as an organisation to train people, and I'm not being disrespectful when I say that, because you can't expect somebody to be on a board without some training.
Oh, absolutely, and we do provide leadership training. We have an annual, very successful major leadership training each year, when we take a group of around 12 to 15 women to Wellington and put them through training, and we also support work being done by the Agri Women's Development Trust. They're doing on governance training for women. We put women through onto things like the Kellogg's course, and so we really support and foster leadership training for women, providing it ourselves and supporting women into other avenues. And we also provide educational bursaries and scholarships as well, and we're in the process of reviewing those because we've had them for many years and they need to still be relevant. So we're looking at the criteria in terms of who's eligible, what they cover in those, and also the value of those, because over time with the costs increasing, you need to keep increasing the value of your scholarships or they cease being relevant.
So somebody who wants to be able to be on a board, wants to be able to be the voice for women and sustainability and the climate change and all that sort of thing, join up with you guys now.
Absolutely, because we do provide the leadership training and we do foster and support women's growth and development and their involvement in sustainable futures.
And I mean, it's refreshing because you're not a women's liberation group. You're actually somebody who's actually saying, then let's better the whole of New Zealand.
Absolutely, because the gender equality thing isn't about being equal to men. I mean, there's some men you don't want to be equal to, let's be honest. But it's about making sure everyone has that equal choice, the equal opportunity, equal chance to be successful and to be involved. And studies show that the more you involve women, the better the outcomes overall for the whole economy and the whole country.
Because you've got a huge amount to offer.
Absolutely. We do.
Kerry, thank you very much
Thank you.
indeed.